Oh hi, and welcome to what is likely to be one of the least glamorous and most scruffy presentations of the weekend. My name's Alistair Clements and I am the Editor-in-Chief of Classic and Sports Car magazine. But I'm not here to talk to you about classic and sports car, wonderful though it is. I'm here to talk to you about the Suzuki Whizzkid, which has been an obsession of mine for 30 something years now. I've owned 4 of them in that time, and the one you see behind me I've had for 15 years. I guess my history with Whizzkids goes all the way back to the age of 12, when I was left some money by my grandma, decided I was going to buy a car, and I found a Whizzkid on the forecourt of a local garage for 200 quid. Sadly, my dad said there's absolutely no way you're buying that Japanese rock box, and I ended up buying a Morris Minor for £100, which was significantly more rusty than any of the Whizzkids I've ever owned. Whizzkids reared their head again about 10 years later when I owned a TVR Tasman and I needed something cheap with a small engine that would be my everyday car in order to be able to insure the TVR. I had a VW Polo which kept breaking, and every time I fixed it I realised I liked it just as little as I did before I'd fixed it, so I thought I'd find something else, and the Whizzkid came back to me. After a bit of searching I found this one here, BBC 363Y, which had only done 18,000 miles with one owner, and it was a fantastic little car. In fact, it will be familiar to people who spend a lot of time reading car magazines, because when I eventually sold it to buy an engagement ring for my wife, it was sold to Suzuki's press office and has since become a press car and is featured in all sorts of magazines, including Classic and Sports Car. I realised within a few weeks though that I'd made a bit of a mistake, not by proposing to my wife, but by getting rid of the Whizzkid, because I love these cars. They are just so fantastic to drive. For those who don't know very much about them, they were Suzuki's first passenger car in the UK. They started coming here in 1979, and they've got a rear-mounted 970cc engine with a mighty 47 horsepower. It drives the rear wheels, and a lot of journalists, I'm ashamed to say, I think I must have done it myself at some point, liken it to a baby Porsche 911, which frankly with 47 horsepower it's not a lot like a Porsche 911, apart from the fact that when it's wet, if you're not very careful, you can hop off the road backwards. But anyway, I owned that first Whizzkid for about 5 years. I was without it for about 7 months before I started looking for another one, because I realised I just couldn't do without them. Before I could find one, however, my wedding came around, and after the nuptials and the speeches, my wife stood up and said she wanted to make a speech too, and handed me a small car key, which was for the car behind me, which I think really told me that I'd made the right choice. Sadly, what I didn't like to tell Emma was, whereas BBC 363Y was perfect apart from the rear wheel arches, which rot on pretty much every Whizzkid, A356 SKJ, which came along to replace it, had perfect wheel arches and was rotten pretty much everywhere else. So over the 15 years my wife and I and my Whizzkid and I have been together, I've been progressively trying to cure as much of that rot as I can. Unfortunately, you can see potentially behind me that there's a newly delivered welder, which suggests that maybe I haven't cured it all, and that is part of the explanation for why the car is not running, so I can't spin you around the block. Anyway, as I said earlier, I've had 4 of them. I had this one here, which, as you can see, wasn't very much to it, and then I had this one here, which is a turbo, and I think the only turbo Whizzkid in Britain, but never really ran properly in the entire time I owned it. Had one hilarious run down the road with my friend and colleague Martin Port in it, and it then jammed with the turbo jammed with dirt from the fuel system, and that was as far as we got. Unlike the turbo, and indeed all the other Whizzkids I've had, however, this particular Whizzkid is something a little bit different. So Whizzkids in the UK were really known as SC100s. The Whizzkid was kind of a promotional tool which really stuck. Mine is called a Servo CXG, which was the name that was given to the SC100 in Hong Kong and Australia, among other territories. So my car was born in 1983, and I actually have the bill of sale here, which is rather nice thing to have. And it was ordered from Chung Tai Hong Motors in Hong Kong for the princely sum of 33,000 Hong Kong dollars, and even came with air conditioning. This is the warranty card for it. I'm embarrassed to say a few years ago, when I was younger and stupider, I sold the aircon system at Beaulieu Auto Jumble because I thought I needed the money, and it's a bit of a shame because it would have been a nice thing to have. That said, with only 47 horsepower on tap, you don't really want an aircon compressor taking any of that power away from you. But the differences between a Servo CXG and an SC100 are it has round headlights instead of square. UK cars have these little rectangular lights which are actually shared bizarrely with the DeLorean DMC-12. Good anorak fact for Trivial Pursuit. And then, as well as the round headlights, it has a totally different interior. So all UK Whizzkids had beige corduroy and vinyl, which was particularly choice. Mine has black vinyl, and then it has a really trippy red and black cloth, or at least it had originally. I've put bucket seats in because I don't want to knacker the original cloth. But it's a little bit like those people who know Porsche's 70s Pasha trim. It's very, very similar to that. Even though we can't actually run it, I guess I should give you a bit of a closer look. So, up here at the business end of the Whizzkid, here we have the mighty 970cc four-cylinder engine, which, as I said before, has got about 47 horsepower. Now, this engine is shared bizarrely with the Suzuki Rascal van. I've always thought this car would really suit a really high-revving bike engine, but instead it's got a van engine. That said, it is a lovely motor. It's really smooth and it revs really sweetly, and frankly pushes the car along at a pretty decent rate when it's working, which brings me to why the car is not on the road at the moment. And that's this little beauty here, which is the exhaust manifold, which has been blowing appallingly and consistently for a very long time. It's been getting worse and worse. I took it to Le Mans Classic last year and basically spent the whole trip listening to the horrible ticking sound from the manifold. So late last year I decided it was time to take the car off the road and get it sorted, and it has been a bit of an epic task. It is finally now on the new manifold with a new gasket, which I got through Alan Parry at Suzuki, who's been fantastically helpful. And just as I was about to get the car all bolted back together and send it off for its MOT, we discovered, guess what, in a Whizzkid? Rot. So round here in the rear wheel arch, just near the trailing arm mount, we've got a nice little hole. However, my friend Tim Smith, who is the absolute guru of all things Suzuki Whizzkid, has told me that that's not a real hole. That's just a mere soupçon of a hole, and he reckons he'll get it sorted in no time at all. So fingers crossed it will be back on the road later this year. I'm hoping that this year I'm going to get to do a little bit more with the car, because last year was a bit of a quiet one, but we have done plenty together in the past. We've done Prescott Hill Climb together, we've done the Three Castles Rally together, and as I say, I've been to the Le Mans Classic 2 times. We were due to go this year, but unfortunately events have rather moved ahead of us. So fingers crossed we'll be going to the 2021 Le Mans Classic instead. If I don't see you there, hopefully we'll see you at a car show. Wouldn't it be great to have one of them again soon? But in the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Thanks hugely to Adam for this fantastic event, and keep reading Classic and Sports Car to find out more about the wonderful Whizzkid.